When most people think of Florida, they picture sandy white beaches and clear blue water. That's all well and good, but not why I'm here. A few days before Christmas of 2019, I drove to Pensacola to visit my friend Trent, who's a student naval flight officer. He's also a big rail fan and plane enthusiast, so we spent the better part of the weekend hunting down trains and planes in the area. I'd like to thank Trent for being a fantastic host and tour guide on my visit, as well as for his immense help with all the info for this video. As soon as I got to his place, we saw the world-famous Blue Angels coming in for a landing. While it was great to see this elite squadron flying, the occasion was a somber one as they had just finished performing a missing man formation at a memorial for the 3 sailors killed at Naval Air Station Pensacola a couple weeks prior. After getting all our photography gear together, we headed into town to see the Florida Gulf and Atlantic. The FG&A is a brand new short line formed just a few months ago on June 1st, 2019. The railroad operates nearly 400 miles of former Louisville and Nashville, as well as Seaboard Airline trackage purchased from CSX, who as part of Precision Scheduled Railroading sold off their P&A subdivision to Tallahassee and their Tallahassee subdivision to Baldwin. CSX still maintains trackage rights over the FG&A, but rarely operates trains on this route. When we arrived at the railroad's Pensacola yard, the crew on duty was setting out a former Penn Central SD40-2, now owned by First Union Rail, a subsidiary of Wells Fargo. While the railroad primarily operates leased equipment, the friendly engineer told us they would soon be getting locomotives painted in parent company Rail USA's fantastic patriotic scheme. After setting out the 6-axle locomotive, the crew then coupled on to another GP38-2 and used the former Southern high hoods to finish switching. Though nighttime had fallen by the time switching duties were over, we stuck around to watch the nightly local depart the yard bound for Eastman Chemical in Pace, Florida. We also ventured downtown to see the train navigate a complicated crossing where the tracks have a little bit of street running, going right through the intersection of 2 major roads. Before calling it a night, we saw Frisco 1355, which was donated to the city of Pensacola in 1957, where it's been well cared for. At the time of our visit, the locomotive was decorated with Christmas lights and also featured a nice memorial for the sailors. We got up before dawn the next morning, hoping to capture lots of trains. Early morning lighting is perfect for what the railroad calls northbounds, even though they're headed due east by compass. We first set up in downtown Atmore, Alabama. Believe it or not, this was a real Amtrak station until 2005 when Hurricane Katrina devastated the region. Sunset Limited service was then terminated in New Orleans, leaving this line without any passenger service. Our first train of the day was a true Hunter Harrison special, with one locomotive up front, mixed freight, random auto racks, a mid-train DPU, and some more auto racks bringing up the rear. After a lot of waiting with no trains or radio chatter, we started heading west in search of something. When we got to Perdido, the cause for the lack of traffic became quickly apparent. Winter track work was in full swing with continuous welded rail being replaced on the main line. This rail train wasn't letting anybody else go through. Knowing there wouldn't be any other trains was a good enough excuse to get lunch at Pearl and Addie's restaurant, a great local spot. The old Amtrak depot in Bay Minette is even more whimsically small than Atmore's, looking more like a rail fanning platform than a recently functional train station. Bay Minette is home to an Archer Daniels Midland sweeteners plant and a rail transload facility. Shortly after lunch, we were treated to a monster coal train. With over 200 cars, it's very likely that CSX combined two empty trains to head back north to coal country in one move, cutting down on crew and fuel costs. We then moved over to Mobile, which I would venture to call the #1 railroad hotspot in Alabama. We set up under one of the bridges crossing over the Mobile River just before Q606 rolled to a stop for a crew change. The ES44AH on the point of the train was sporting a Friends of Coal bumper sticker on the cab, supporting a good cause. After the new crew boarded the train, they began confirming information with the dispatcher. They were asked if they thought the power on the train would be sufficient for their tonnage. They said they thought it would be good enough, but as soon as they got clearance to proceed, the lead locomotive was visibly struggling to get the train in motion. As you'll soon see, the lead locomotive on this northbound train was so down on its knees that it lurched while fighting wheel slip. The extra 8 tons of ballast built into this heavy variant compared to a typical GEVO may have made the difference between this train getting moving and being stuck. By the time the mid-train DPU reached us, the train was rolling pretty well and soon cleared the 100-year-old swing bridge going over Chickasaw Creek. After Q606 went by, we started exploring the fascinating rail yards of Mobile. What makes these so unique is that public roads run all through them, allowing rail fans to see switching action up close and personal without trespassing. Terminal Railway Alabama State Docks is one of the railroads you can view in the area. Unfortunately, we missed seeing them in action, but did get a nice look at 3 of their classic MP15 DC switchers. Their numbering system is simple yet effective. 771 was the first unit bought in 1971, 801 and 803 were the first and third units bought in 1980. As we continued exploring the many industries and yards of Mobile, we found a CSX geometry train tied down in one of them. Next, we headed over to see Airbus's Mobile factory, which does final assembly on their A320 family of aircraft and will soon add the A220. A very special treat was watching Delta's newest A321, November 391 Delta November, give a wing wave as it took off on its delivery flight headed to Minneapolis-St. Paul. We then headed to the heart of downtown Mobile, where the CSX mainline runs underneath the Mobile Convention Center. The RSA Battle House Tower, seen to the left, is the tallest building in Alabama at 745 feet and 35 floors. Just across the Mobile River, Austell USA builds ships for the Navy, including the Littoral Combat Ship and Expeditionary Fast Transport seen here. We really lucked out with the weather on our trip, as Mobile is actually the rainiest city in the US, with Pensacola taking second place. Mobile is also the birthplace of Mardi Gras, not New Orleans like most people think. Industry is booming in Mobile as the city hosts numerous manufacturing facilities, shipyards, and international ports, bringing billions of dollars of revenue to the state of Alabama. Getting back into the train action, we see local M724, led by 2 CSX rebuilds of Conrail heritage, rolling by the Alabama Cruise Terminal, where the Carnival Fantasy departs for its Mexican voyages. After watching the train roll under the convention center, we ended up passing it again as we headed back towards the yards to see some switching action. Genesee and Wyoming's Alabama Gulf Coast Railway is one occupant of the area, and we saw crews wrapping up switching work for the evening, excited to go home for the Christmas holiday. Alabama Export Railroad is another brand new short line in the area, being created in August. The railroad operates on 12 miles of track leased from Illinois Central and serves 8 customers. Their switching operation was fascinating to watch as the crew throttled up their former Louisville and Nashville GP38-2s to kick cars. The practice of kicking cars involves getting the train up to speed, uncoupling a car while still moving, slowing the locomotives, and letting the cars roll freely to their intended spot. It takes experienced crews to know how fast the cars need to be moving so that they'll stop where they need to. While kicking cars is a much quicker method of switching, many railroads have banned the practice due to the danger of uncontrolled freight cars rolling down tracks as well as higher fuel consumption from the constant throttle changes on the locomotives. As we left Mobile, we took a moment to look at the stunning Gulf Mobile and Ohio passenger terminal, which was built in 1907. Making our way west, we finally ran into the first CSX southbound train of the day, forcing Trent to do some Dukes of Hazzard style driving. We paced the train for a few minutes before going on to Perdido to see it at the County Road 47 crossing. About 20 minutes after getting to the crossing, we still hadn't seen the train. Turning on our scanner, we found out that a complete failure of the positive train control system had sent the train into emergency. The crew unsuccessfully tried to get the PTC system back online multiple times, but eventually had to have the dispatcher issue a waiver for them to operate without it. When the train finally got underway and reached us, the 5 GEs were working hard to get back up to track speed. We then continued back to Atmore, stopping for dinner at Buster's, a local restaurant that probably hasn't changed one bit in the last 50 years. The delicious dinner had us ready to get back out on the high iron. As soon as we crossed the tracks, another empty coal train went flying by at track speed. Heading across town near the Alabama Gulf Coast Railway Bridge, we saw another CSX northbound manifest roll through. Just a couple minutes after that train went by, AGR's nightly train bound for Pensacola rolled across their bridge. The 6-axle EMDs running long hood forward brought a sizable cut of mostly empty boxcars for paper loading in Florida. As AGR's train was still rolling across the bridge, the CSX Q520 got a limited clear signal, so we prepared to head back to the festively decorated depot to watch it pass. This train would be our last one for the night, marking the end of a fantastic rail fanning adventure. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks again to Trent for all his help on it. For more great content just like this, subscribe to Signal Light Productions on YouTube and follow us on Instagram.